are live. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast. We are on episode number 159 today, and my name is DJ Ligori, and this is the show where we talk about how we can do hard things better through both mental and physical fitness. If you have not already, I highly recommend, after this episode, obviously, going and listening to our previous episode with Melissa Capurro. We had an awesome talk about ego deaths and social media, and I listened to it and it was awesome. And it's kind of weird sometimes re-listening to a podcast that you recorded, but you forget about some of the things that you actually talk about in that show. So if you have some extra time after this podcast, highly suggest going back and listening to that one. It's episode number 158. And today what I want to talk about is, let me ask you a question first. Have you ever caught yourself kind of spiraling into a worst case scenario that never actually happens? All right. For example, let's say that your boss sends you a one-word response email, and the first thought in your head is, I'm going to be fired. And you have no idea why. And you're just like, oh my God, why did they only send me a one-word response email? I thought I was very considerate and I thought I wrote that email so well written, right? We kind of just spiral out of control with all these possible projections of what could happen. The person who ghosts you when you text them, right? Then you're thinking oh my God, they don't like me. I must have said something weird. Now they're going to go tell their friends that I'm a weird person. And then I'm going to see those friends out one day and they're going to ostracize me from the community and it's going to be so bad. And then everybody's going to know about it, right? Have you ever done that before? Because I have. 100%. I've done that probably in both of those scenarios, both personally and professionally. And I actually remember I had a basketball coach once who would text back K, the dreaded K text, where you literally go through every single text that you just sent to him and be like, okay, where's the attitude that I gave him? What did I say that he didn't like? Until I realized that was just how he responded and everything was okay. So, and I think that story gives a nice little representation of how we can often just completely overthink things when we realize that everything is kind of okay. Everything's fine. We're just kind of creating these ideas in our head based upon this thing in our head called our brain. All right. So I want you guys to first realize that you're not alone with that, right? This idea that something happens in our lives and we then spiral out of control. We project the worst possible negative scenario that is ultimately going to hurt us in some way. And I have a reason why I think we go there, which I'll dive into. But basically, you're not alone with this, right? We all kind of do this because we all have brains, and our brains are wired to literally keep us alive. So our brains are detecting any threat or any danger, and it's saying, hey, be aware of this, right? Because we don't want you to get hurt in this way. And that's really what's kind of going on, right? So you're not alone with that. So today what I want to do is I want to just kind of deconstruct that idea. And there's one thing that I use, strategy that I kind of use whenever I have this, and it's pretty simple. And it's done me well each time I've kind of gotten to that point of oh my God, why do I think, I think this thing's going to happen? And I just kind of ask myself a simple little question, and it kind of brings me back down to earth, and it's pretty helpful. So I want to get to that point. Yet, as I said, right, our brain is this threat-seeking mechanism. And this is because in the olden days, right, when you were walking through the woods and a freaking saber-toothed tiger was hawking you down, your brain needed to detect that to keep you alive. Now, here's the thing. We still have that brain. So our brain is still doing the thing that it's supposed to do, right? It's just detecting possible threat, right? It doesn't mean the saber-toothed tiger is going to attack you, but it means that it's just there, right? So let's just be aware of it. So our brain is still doing the same thing. So when I kind of started to think deeper into this, I'm what am I actually afraid of, right? When that person doesn't text me back, what am I actually afraid of? Or when that email I get back from my boss or my manager is not the email that I wanted to hear, right? Maybe it was just some simple statement. What am I actually really afraid of? And what I realized was, I think the fear, and I actually came to this realization after this past week, I had three people kind of go through these same scenarios, right? Like something happened in their lives. They projected the worst possible outcome and said, oh my God, what if that thing comes true? And then they basically experienced that thing as if it was like already true, right? They already were kind of like in that environment of experience the negative thing when it's like, whoa, this isn't even real yet. Like this isn't even a thing yet. But we're in that, we're totally in that environment right now, and that doesn't feel that good. So when I had like a couple of these experiences, and this is me like listening to people tell me about these experiences, and then this is me just actually thinking about like my own experiences when I do this, I was like, what is it that we are just like, what's the thing? Like, what are we actually doing, and what are we trying to avoid, right? Because like whenever I think about stress or fear, I then think about what's the avoidance. Like, what is the thing that I'm trying to avoid that is causing me to be stressed or causing me to be afraid of something? And I think the real deep rooted fear is being alone. Like, let that sink in a little bit. I think all of this is just because we're super, super afraid to be alone. Because being alone is more dangerous, right? Being alone is lonely. Being alone, it goes against our human needs of connection and love. I think all of this just stems from us just trying not to be alone. And if you think about the work email, right, or the text message, right, like if I was to go to like the super, super deep reason that that thing actually does make us afraid, it actually stems from being alone. And here's what I mean. Now, obviously, this is a very exaggerated example, but I want us to kind of just realize like, oh, maybe there is like just this deep fear of being alone that just fights its way up to the surface, and that's what we experience, right? So let's say that boss sends you that one statement email back, right? And we get nervous. The projection then becomes, okay, am I performing well, or am I going to lose my job, right? Like, does that email back to me, is that a signal that I'm not doing well? Because if I'm not doing well, that means I could lose my job. And if I lose my job, that means I lose my immediate income. And if I lose my immediate income, that means I lose a lot of freedom as well as a lot of security. And depending upon if you're in a relationship with somebody, that other person also loses their reliance on you for security and for freedom and for spontaneity, because now you've lost that income source. So now it's a matter of, is my partner, my girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever, going to leave me? Now I'm officially alone, meaning in a relationship alone. And now if I don't have an income coming in, I'm probably going to be more alone moving forward because I'm not going to be that desirable and that attractive to other possible mates. Can you see how like you can get to this very deep level? Now, having said that, is that what runs through our heads each time? I don't think it runs to that degree. I think we just experience the thought. I don't think we run through that whole series. I think that deep-seated fear just kind of rips through everything and gets to the top because our brain, as we mentioned, is wired to protect us. So it's kind of like, hey, let's just cut through all the levels here, and I'm just going to send you the actual thing, right, that you're actually afraid of. And that's, I think, what we experience. Right. So anytime that you're spiraling out of control, and this is something where like I'm trying to get better at this moving forward, because and I'll tell you the question that I use too in a second here, but this is just like part of the human experience, right? Is managing this stress and this fear, right? I actually made a video last week about how our life is a direct result of how well we can manage stress. And I truly believe that. And I think if we understand this fear of just being alone and how it rips to the surface, we can kind of start to question it a little bit and challenge it a little bit. And this is the strategy that I wanted to share with everybody here. So thoughts kind of come and go into our head like traffic. And I heard this from actually a Acres of Diamonds Young Man community member. And he learned this, I think, from, might have been like a Headspace app or something like that. And he was like, whenever I meditate, I literally think of like my thoughts as like traffic, right? Where they're just kind of like passing by and just going on, right? And we can like stare at a car in traffic for like a really long time, which is basically us focusing on a certain thought. Or we can just kind of watch the thoughts go by, because we are ultimately not our thoughts. Our thoughts are just things that kind of come into our head, and we then choose what we want to focus on. So if these thoughts start to come into our head that don't make us feel good, right? The possible really bad negative projection. What can we do to kind of navigate that? I've talked a lot about curiosity, right? And I don't know if people like fully understand just how powerful curiosity is, yet I hear over and over and over and over again from some of the world's smartest people in the world that curiosity will literally save you. Curiosity is a modern day superpower. And so what ends up, personally, what I do is when I have like these spiraling moments, I just ask myself this simple question of, is this true? Right? And you kind of like push against it, right? Oh my God, my boss sent me that email back. I'm going to get fired. Is that really true? Right? Like, you've been doing great in work. You've been doing great on these projects. You did great on these presentations. You're getting along with your coworkers. You are a contributing member to this team. Is that really true? Right? And you can then start to find all these little pieces of evidence in your life that the thing that you think is going to happen is probably not going to happen. And I would even go a step further to add myself even more insurance that even if the bad thing was to happen, let's say you did lose your job, I still think that we'd be able to get through it. I still think that no matter the bad thing, we're going to keep moving forward. Our path from point A to point B is this absolute mess of up and down and backwards and forward a little bit, then up and down, right? It's everywhere. Yet the thing is, we're always going to end up at B, right? We are going to get to our goals in completely unpredictable ways. We can't predict the future. All we can do is be here in the moment and do the best we can with whatever information we have, right? So even if the bad thing does happen, we can still get through it. Granted, assuming you're not getting attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, all right? That would be tough, all right? But nonetheless, I don't think that's happening these days, all right? Our fears are completely these perceptions of possible outcomes, right? Of losing the job, of losing your partner, right? Of being, humiliated on social media, right? Or having just a story put out about you that isn't necessarily true, right? Which then goes back to our fear of being alone, right? Nobody's going to want to talk to you anymore. Nobody's going to hang out with you, right? It's the same thing of when you put a picture up or a video up and it doesn't get a lot of engagement. Oh, nobody's going to want to talk to me anymore, right? Nobody's going to want to engage with who I am, right? And my authentic self, right? I'm going to be alone. That's really what at least I believe that we are just trying to run away from, right? I just want to be connected. I want to be part of these communities. That's why we love being part of communities, because it doesn't make us feel alone, right? So whenever you have that negative spiral, right? Those possible projections, right? Of these thoughts that are going through your head, is this true? Right? And ask yourself it almost in like a condescending way. That's like inner DJ, right? Up in my noggin. I'm like, is this true? Like, come on, bro. Right? And I'll like talk myself down from it. And I'll have to ask myself that like multiple times, 3, 4, 5 times. After the 5th time, I'm like, I think we're good. Right? Like, I don't think I need to keep focusing on this thing because it's not making me feel that good. Right? So quick recap. We all do this, right? You are not alone. Our brains are wired to protect us, and sometimes we will slip into these slippery slopes of projecting the worst possible outcome into our current reality, and we'll actually experience that outcome as if it's actually happening right now. When really, because our brains are just wired to detect threat and keep us alive, it typically is not as bad as we think it is. And the way that we can get through this is simply asking ourselves, is this true, right? What is a other possible outcome? And I would even encourage you to, if you're going to ask yourself that question of what is another possible outcome, make the outcome better, right? If you ask yourself that question, you have the right to answer it the way you want to answer it, right? And this isn't just disregarding everything, right? Look at the reality, right? Look at the resources that you have available. Look at the past maybe, right? And find an answer that makes yourself feel good, right? Is this really true? There's going to be some other things out there, and that's where that curiosity starts to kick in, all right? So we're not alone with this, all right? Let's help each other work through this negative projection of when people ghost us and when people send funny emails and when people don't like our photos and comment on it. It's going to be all right? We're not getting attacked by saber-toothed tigers, okay? So as always, thank you guys so much for your time and your energy tuning into today's episode. I hope it was of value. If you got something out of this, I'm always super, super grateful. If you rate, you review, and you subscribe to the Libraries and Weight Rooms podcast, or you share it on your Instagram stories. And it's okay if it doesn't get any likes. It's all right if it doesn't get any likes, right? It's a work in progress. All right. So thank you guys so much for your time today. And as always, keep doing hard things through both mental and physical fitness. And we'll talk to you guys soon.